Selectmen. First, I would like to announce that this meeting is being recorded and ask if there's anyone in the audience who is also recording. Seeing none, if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the first item we have tonight is public comment, and we have Darlene Coyle, who has signed up. Good evening, Darlene.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to let you know that we just finished up our 4 weeks of yard waste pickup, with the last one ending on Saturday. As we do every year, we try to figure out the best times to start and end, and Mother Nature ultimately has the last say. So we still have a lot of leaves left on the tree. So we have scheduled another yard waste pickup, and that's going to be on Saturday, December 2nd. It'll give everybody a chance to let the leaves fall and be able to clean up and get through the Thanksgiving holiday. So that will give us, it's actually 3 weeks from now. So December 2nd, Saturday, I'd like to have residents, if they have any yard waste, to put it out by the curb by 7 a.m. and Republic will go around and pick it up. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Darlene. There's a lot of buzz on social media about that, so I'm glad you added the extra day. And before we move on to our first public hearing, I just have an announcement I'd like to read. There will be a senior resource fair on December 15th, free, informative, and fun event being held at the Lorraine Glick Norgren Senior Center in Auburn, including refreshments, drawings, and awareness tables. Seniors, adults with disabilities, caregivers, and other guests are all invited to learn about important resources that are available to them in Auburn. Join us on December 15th, 2017 between 9 and 11:30 for a morning of financial, legal, and safety information, along with health and awareness tables, as well as representatives of local agencies. Highlights of the event include local resident assistance options, tax exemptions, deferrals, and work-off programs, veterans benefits, health screenings, staying safe in your home, health and wellness programs available for seniors, local resources and activities, free chair massages, and free crafts. For free transportation to and from the event, please call the Senior Center to reserve your ride. Okay, and we have a 7:05 public hearing that was advertised. We're just a couple minutes early for that. If we want to move up an agenda item, I think we could move up the proclamations. Item 5D.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's moved up. In your packet, you'll find a request for a proclamation for the Riley Award winner. Let me just get to that. And also a ratification for that. Is there a motion regarding the ratification of the Boston Post-Cane proclamation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Regarding the proclamation for the recipient of the John E. and Ethel E. Riley Outstanding Citizenship Award, that will go to Alice Ray on Thanksgiving Eve. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the proclamation for Alice M. Ray for the John E. and F. Lee Riley Outstanding Citizenship Award.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Seeing that it's now 7:05, is there a motion to open the tax classification hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Ms. Cosgrove, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kasanovich, our CFO, to make the introduction, and then you can move on with your presentation. Mr. Kasanovich.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Our Chief Assessor, Cindy Cosgrove, and Assistant Assessor, Seth Willard, are going to present to you tonight the Tax classification value and its impacts, different classes. A packet has been provided to you in advance of tonight's hearing. We were available during the course of the week to answer any questions you may have. Thank you for taking the time and calling in. But Cindy has a comprehensive, she always does a great job in presenting these values to you on an annual basis. So I'll turn it over to Cindy, and then we can open it up for questions after her presentation.
Welcome, Cindy. And just before you start, so what we'll do tonight for a format, Cindy will do her presentation. I'll ask Mr. Kazanovich if he has anything to add. I'll see if the board members have any questions relative to the presentation. If not, we'll open it up to public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the board for discussion, close the hearing, and take a vote. Okay? Good evening, Cindy.
Good evening.
Go ahead.
My name once again is Cindy Cosgrove, and I'm the Chief Assessor. This is Seth Willard. He's new to Auburn this year. He's our Assistant Assessor. Does anybody need a copy of the presentation? Does everyone have one? Do you have a copy? Do you need one? Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so the presentation is similar to last year. The numbers have changed. And just a reminder that the calculations for the tax rate and other numbers are estimated at this time of preparation. There are some changes that will happen as the process goes further with the small commercial exemption, and there may be some adjustments that have to be made in the other numbers. And there may be some additional informational slides included in handouts that we won't use in the presentation tonight. The purpose of the hearing, Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 56, allows a shift in the tax burden between property classes. This shift does not change the total tax levy for the community. It simply determines the share to be borne by the different classes. What the hearing doesn't do, it does not determine the tax rate for the town. It only determines how it's distributed. And it does not determine how much money can be raised. Town meetings are the ones who determine what the tax levy will be when they vote. The tax levy is determined by town meeting appropriations and expenditures, state and county charges. We pay for it using town revenues such as excise, fees, enterprise funds, and other available funds. Total taxable real estate and personal property, state aid and reimbursements, new growth, and debt exclusions and overrides. The role of the assessor, my job is to first value property for the purpose of equitable taxation, administer abatements and exemptions, be a resource to taxpayers, and explain the classification options to the selectmen every year at the classification hearing. An overview of the revaluation process. Residential properties in Massachusetts, per Proposition 2.5, are adjusted annually to full and fair market value. Some of the attributes affecting the value would include the style, condition, interior and exterior features, and the size of your home. Commercial and industrial properties are based on an income approach to value per the Department of Revenue requirements. And personal property in town, which is the personal property, it's computers, equipment being used by businesses. That is done with a net book value new minus depreciation approach to value. The four votes which the Board of Selectmen is going to take here tonight is number one, a vote on the residential factor, which is the shift, which everyone knows about. The second vote is on an open space discount, which would shift the burden within the residential classes to discount open space. We do not currently have any land classified as open space, so we do not do this. A residential exemption, which also shifts the burden within the residential classes, and then a small commercial exemption, which shifts the burden within the commercial industrial classes to give a discount to qualifying properties. To give you an idea, comparing 2008 to 2018, you will see that the green, which represents residential, actually has shrunk. We have a larger portion that is the commercial industrial. And industrial, both of those have grown. Personal property has also grown. So between 2008 and 2018, you'll see that the businesses are carrying a larger proportion of the tax burden for the town. And that's before the split. That's just the natural makeup. The tax levy for the town, the levy limit is the maximum amount that a town can levy in any given year. That's last year's tax levy plus new growth, which is your new construction, things coming on the market, your new homes, plus 2.5% of the previous year's levy. The maximum allowable levy is that levy limit plus any debt exclusions and overrides the town may have voted for. And the excess levy capacity that we'll talk about today is what our levy limit is, our maximum allowable levy, minus what we're actually raising and appropriating. And Auburn has, over the past few years, grown that amount so that we have a lot more in reserve. We are not levying to the max. This is a look at the calculations that we use. So for fiscal year 2017, we had $41,443,605. 2.5% of that, which is what we're allowed to levy according to Proposition 2.5, is $1,036,090. The new growth for fiscal year 2018 is $610,144, and we did not have any Proposition 2.5 overrides. So our fiscal year 2018 levy limit is $43,089,839. We do have debt exclusions for the high school and the middle school. Those debt exclusions come to $2,952,945. So the maximum levy that we could for fiscal year 2018 would be $46,042,784. For 2018, the factors that are driving the tax increases, we do have an increase this year in the excluded debt for the Auburn Middle School. And we have had some demolitions, properties that have gone off the tax rolls due to demolition from snow, fire, and other kinds of damage. And we've had properties that have become exempt, that have been foreclosed by the town or purchased by other charitable and exempt organizations. The trends this year, residential growth has gone up significantly this year. Residential growth is usually the most stable. It doesn't tend to be skewed by individual properties, but we've had a lot of new construction in the town. Commercial growth this year is actually down. These numbers are a little more volatile. They can be affected by one significant new property or addition. But this year we've had a slowdown. We have a lot of projects that have just finished and some new ones that are coming on board that haven't started yet. The industrial growth is down once again this year as well. Like the commercial, it can be affected by one significant new property or new addition. This is the third year of fairly low industrial growth for the town. And personal property growth is down. These numbers tend to be very volatile. New growth from businesses moving into a town, it always provides for a significant increase. This year, we did not have any significant growth from our public utilities last year. The year before last, we had an enormous amount due to the October storm, where they had to invest a lot more money in equipment and repair work. Last year, we did a complete data recollection throughout the whole town of all the personal property accounts. So once again, that number was large. This year it is down. It's more on the average of where we would have been without those two exceptional years. This is kind of showing you in a graph so you can compare the various types of property. You'll see that the residential has been growing steadily, peaking this year. You'll see the commercial, which is the orange, has been fairly steady, and then this year you'll see that's lower. The industrial has been low for several years, and it's remained there. Personal property, you will see that this year we're about where we were in 2015. We had that extraordinary spike for those 2 years, and now it's gone back to a normal level. Notable changes in the growth were basically the residential growth, new condo complex that's gone in, a couple of residential developments, so this has spiked it. Residential percentage change due to revaluation. This is kind of comparing the 2 years. This year, the overall residential change was up 3.99. So we've had an increase in the residential values. And the chart just breaks it apart into the various ones. You'll see that the vacant land this year was the largest increase. And that was just basically due to the values of the vacant land sales. Just this next page, what this does is it kind of equalizes, showing you the FY18 rate and the value changes. So for your average property, or your average residential property, if last year it was valued at $200,000, their tax bill would have been $3,668, and the tax rate last year was $18.34. Because the values have gone up 3.99%, that same property this year would be valued at $207,980. In order to get to that same tax bill amount, the resulting tax rate would actually have to go down. And you also have to keep in mind that although the residential overall change was 3.99, different types of properties may have changed at varying rates, so it's not applied evenly across the whole database. So the second vote that we're going to take is going to be on the residential discount. Up to 20% of a discount can be offered to owner-occupied residential properties. What this would do in Auburn is basically shift the burden from less expensive homes onto the higher priced homes and non-resident homes. This is basically an option that would work well in a community that has a large amount of vacation homes that are non-owner occupied. In a town like Auburn, all it would really do is shift the burden from one class of property owners to another. The small commercial exemption, the Board of Selectmen has traditionally been doing this. This has no effect on the residential and personal property rates. This is only across the commercial industrial properties. The industrial properties do not qualify, but they do share in the tax burden for this exemption. The exemption goes to the property owner, not the business. It relies on the trickle-down effect. And for multi-business properties, all the businesses on that property have to qualify. To get the exemption, your value must be less than $1 million. You must have less than 10 employees. We get a list annually from the Department of Workforce Development, and in order for incorporated properties to qualify, they have to be on that list. If they are not on the list, they must be DBAs, and then the Board of Assessors can qualify them by application. Small incorporated businesses, once again, must be on the list in order to qualify for this. Each year, all properties not on the list need to refile applications with the Board of Assessors. In anticipation that this has been done in the past, we do send them out so that if the Board of Selectmen does decide to vote, we have that list in the works, and we're in the process of qualifying potentially the businesses that would get it. What this exemption does is it shifts the tax rate by 10% between properties occupied by the qualifying small businesses onto the other commercial industrial properties. Applications are taken after the tax classification hearing, and processing does delay our tax rate setting. It usually takes me an extra couple weeks to get the tax rate set once we have decided if we're going to do the exemption. Any exemptions that we don't process before we submit the recap would impact the overlay account and eventually impact the residential tax rate. So we like to get this all done ahead of time. Just to give you an idea, applying this exemption to Auburn, I bring you through the various shifts, and you'll see that the average difference that it makes to the commercial industrial properties who qualify versus don't qualify ranges between 10 and 11 cents. This year, we're at 120. The difference between the two tax rates as things stand now would be 10 cents. To kind of bring you through, to give you an example of the financial impact it has on the various properties. If you have a property that's commercial, it's valued at $250,000. If it qualifies for the exemption, the taxes for that property would be $5,436. If it does not qualify for the exemption, its taxes would be $6,040. So it goes up substantially if they do not qualify. The difference if we did not have the exemption in place and the unqualified property, it would be $6,015. So the burden that's being shifted here is really minimal. It's only about $25 on the average commercial property. This is just a listing of the historic, the CIP split that we have selected over the years. You'll see in 2006, we were up at a high of 1.62. Over the years, the Board of Selectmen has gradually been bringing that down. And you can see now for 2017, the rate that was voted was 1.20. We did stay flat for 2014, 15, and 16, and then last year the vote was to go down by another 2%. So we're getting there. It's a long, slow process, but we are getting there. This is a chart that basically shows you, since we started changing that split, you will see that this indicates the commercial industrial as their percentage of new growth. And you'll see that from 2006 to now, that percentage has risen and the residential proportion has gone down. So it's kind of an indication that as we have shifted the rate, it has done what we needed it to do, and it has stimulated the businesses to grow. This is showing you the commercial industrial, the growth trends as the factor has changed. Once again, you'll see that the percentage of growth back 2003 was at 57.20, and if you look in the later years as the shift has gone down, the growth as a percentage has actually been in the 60s, 70s regularly. And you also have to keep in mind that the new growth is based on the previous year's tax rate. So it actually is an even better indicator, because as the shift has gotten smaller, the tax rate that this growth is based on has actually gotten smaller. So it's a significant change in the business growth. So in 2006, this is showing you what the split was. The full fair cash value of commercial industrial property in Auburn was at 23.65% of the levy. Once they had shifted it, the burden borne by those properties was 38.31. In 2017, when we changed to the 1.20, the commercial industrial base the natural base was at 25.48 at full fair cash value, and the shifted percentage is at 30.58, so it's significantly lower than it was. The gap is now only about 5%. This is a chart that compares the various communities that we would be competing with for our commercial industrial. And you will see that, looking at the tax rates for these buildings, we're assuming that these are the annual taxes based on a $1 million building. So you'll see that Grafton, Millbury, Oxford, Leicester, Sturbridge are fairly low. Shrewsbury is extremely low. And then you have Worcester and Auburn at the end. Worcester is the purple, the big tall one, and Auburn is next to it. And you can see we're lower, much lower than Worcester, but we're still above those other communities we're competing with. And this is what the rate chart is going to look at like for the upcoming fiscal year. We're assuming that there is a 10% small commercial exemption like there was in the previous year for the sake of this presentation. So you'll see that we have, you know, the residential and we have the personal property rate are different. We do have better charts as we go through, but this is just an example. This is showing you the impact of splitting the tax rate on the average property. And as you go through, we show the average fiscal year 2018 values for residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. And as you go through the various splits, you can see how the burden for that class changes. Currently, we're at the 1.20. If we went to a single rate for residential properties, just to give you an example, we would be at $5,038 for their tax bill. With the rate at 1.20, that tax bill is $4,635. For the average commercial property, their bill with a rate of 1 would be $22,566. With the split at the 1.20, that property pays $27,084. If you look on the next page, this chart actually shows the dollar amount of the change for the various properties. So by changing the rate to 1, the average residential property goes up $402. At the various changes, if we went down to a 1.19, the difference would be $20, and it's prorated. For a commercial property, changing the rate to 1 would save them $4,518. Going down to a 1.19 would save them $224. And this is just, it shows you kind of what the effect of the split rate is on the commercial industrial assessments. So you have two properties, property A, property B. With property A, we have a higher tax rate. That's taken into consideration, you have a lower net operating income. The result is a lower assessment. Property B, you have the lower tax rate, higher net operating income. Result is a higher assessment. So the higher taxes do have a negative impact on the building values. Raising the tax rate lowers the assessment, lowering the actual tax dollar gain from the split, and it does discourage the commercial industrial growth. This chart here, I know it's kind of hard to read. This brings you through, this is really the meat of the presentation. This brings you through each type of property, showing you with the rate of what the taxes were last year, with the rate of revaluation increase, and the change in the tax rate at the various levels, what the new taxes would be, and what the percentage of increase for each bill would be. Because this year we had a change in the residential values went up. Commercial values and industrial values stayed fairly flat. What you will see is even at the same rate as last year, the residential properties do have an increase this year, and the commercial industrial properties actually went down slightly, and they will have a very small savings. But that is just a natural product of the revaluation. What I did is I chose basically, I chose rates in increments of 5, and then I did go 120 and 122, just to give you an idea, and I put in 118, 119, and 120, if anybody wanted to see those numbers to look at a shift. But this does equalize everything. It takes into effect the the revaluation of the properties, plus the changes in the tax rates. This chart here is just showing you the average Auburn residential bill versus the state average. And the tax rate in Auburn seems high sometimes when you look at it. But what you have to keep in mind is our values are affordable, and our average tax bill is still about $1,000, I mean, about $1,000 less than the state average. And if you look at it, pretty much the line has stayed fairly parallel. This goes from 2004 up to 2017, and you can see that Auburn has lagged below the state average all the way along. So the single-family tax bill for fiscal year 17 was $5,247, and the Auburn average was $4,214. And, I'm sorry, our commercial rate is the 67th highest in the state, up from number 72. So that puts us in the top 1/4 of the state. The home value trends, this next chart basically tells you what the changes in the market value for residential properties has been. You'll see that from 1988, it went up. You had a peak in 2007 and 2008, and then you had a decline again, and you'll see that we're approaching the same levels as we were in 2007 and 2008. We have a very healthy market out there right now, and properties are increasing in value. This chart here just shows you the number of foreclosure sales per assessor's records. What you have to keep in mind is this chart shows you the actual foreclosures. This doesn't indicate there may be a lot of properties that are in the foreclosure process, but until the banks actually take the properties and the deed comes over, we do not see those. But you will see that we are down. We did have a peak in 2010 with 39 in Auburn, and last year we were down to 29. And this is just a sample of what the classification sheet that's going to be signed by the Board of Selectmen looks like. And you'll see on the front, it gives you the percentage of the full and fair, and then it gives you the new percentage of it. It talks about the small commercial exemption. Last year, we had 53 properties. For the sake of the presentation, I'm once again assuming that that's going to be about the same value for the upcoming year. And then on the final page, it will show you what the excess levy capacity for the current fiscal year is. So we have been holding the line this year. We are at 1.25 of the 2.5% that we're allowed to levy. So you'll be able to see that there is that excess capacity as we build up our reserves. Any money that is in the excess levy capacity is money that we are not currently, it's money that we're saving the taxpayers. This chart here is showing you how we have built up those reserves. We started in fiscal year 2011 with $833,389 going in. This year, we are projected, once all is said and done, to be at about $4,561,404. So once again, it's savings to the taxpayers because many of our local communities are levying to the max. And just to give you an example of what would happen if we did levy to the max, our 2018 rate at 1.20 would be $18.44. If we levied to the max, we would be at $20.48 for the residential properties. Their tax bill would go up about $513.09. For commercial properties, this year the rate would be at $24.16. That rate would go up to $26.83. So the average commercial bill would be up about $3,105. And this is just a copy of what the final rate chart for this year is. I have included a full-page copy of the charts for people so that you can actually read it, because it is a little small. And that's the end.
Thank you, Ms. Cosgrove. Mr. Kazanovich, do you have anything to add at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair, a few comments. I think it's important for the board to know that the rate is inflated by approximately $2 per 1,000 due to the amount we have to raise outside of the levy for the payment of debt and interest on the current Auburn Middle School and the Auburn High School. So when you look at an adjusted rate, if you were to peel that off, Auburn would be very competitive with other bordering communities. Our residential tax rate would be in the vicinity of $16.40 per 1,000 instead of the $18.40 at the 120 benchmark as calculated by Cindy in her presentation. I also want to remind the board that there's a long-term financial plan in addressing the differential. And we've worked very hard in trying to give this board and other boards the tools required which will allow them to continue that trend. We've been very conservative on a budgetary side. We haven't taxed to the max in 8 years. The trend would show that the average increase in taxation is about 1.14 out of 2.5 over the 8-year period. So that allows us to free up some levy that would allow the board to consider a downward trend in addressing the single tax rate. I think it's important to note also, if you turn to page 15, when you look at the residential classes, due to the revaluation, given the fact that the industrial and commercial property classes are slightly down, this is what's really driving the increase in taxation, even at a 120. So we always said that we would look at times of opportunity to continue to compress that differential. But the revaluation increase by class, there is a difference this year on the residential side versus the commercial side. So if you turn to page 33, we have an analysis by class. Once again, if you stay at 120, the residential single-family home, the average is going to go up $232. The condo class is going to go up $78 and change. Two-family up $184. Three-family up $165. Commercial and industrial would go down. Average commercial at 1.121, slightly down from 1.130, would go down about $225, and industrial would go down $33. It's also important to note that since 2010, when we started this, when we started addressing the differential, as well as incorporating our adopted financial plans, we are seeing positive results of that continued movement downward. These numbers are, these new growth numbers reflect a higher increase in the commercial industrial growth at a percentage of high 60s to 70s, when the average prior to the board addressing the differential was somewhere in the 50s. That in itself offers a residential taxpayer's relief, because you are increasing the value of the commercial industrial, they're picking up a larger share of that tax base. So we're committed to addressing this in the long term. But I think given the increase in value on the residential, that's something you're going to have to digest and consider in your vote tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. Do members have any questions regarding the presentation? Seeing none, is there any public comment?
I don't know much about
If you could just come up to the microphone, please. You need to come up to the microphone. I know you, you have to come up to the microphone and give your name for the record.
Linda Lapenzi, okay? I am a master level clinician who services people in the area for 24 and a half years. I consider myself a good citizen. I moved to Auburn to put my daughter in a better school. I'm having a little problem right now with trying to decide. I always try to have 2 vehicles on the road because I'm an outreach clinician. If one breaks down, I can service my clients, whether they're suicidal or whatever, and pop into the other vehicle.
I don't want to interrupt you. Is this regarding the tax classification?
No, I'm confused about why the guy from the code department, Mr. Travis, sent me over here.
We can address, right now, the agenda item that we're on is tax classification, so I'm going to have to ask you to wait until the next public comment
I just don't know
regarding
how this is run, and
Yeah,
I just figured I'd come because he told me to come.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely, and we can address it at the next public comment, or we can see if we can get that question answered. But right now, we're on tax classification. Does anyone want to make a... Mr. Sarkeesian, if you could come up and give your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Mark Sarkeesian Jr., and I'm speaking here tonight representing the business community as well as the entire town of Auburn. Over the past 10 of 12 years, the Auburn Board of Selectmen have taken steps to reduce the business tax rate from the 2006 differential of 1.62 to the present rate of 1.20. We are fighting to keep our businesses that we have going to our neighboring towns, and we want to retain the ones that are here. Grafton just voted last week to maintain a single tax rate. And Webster is voting tonight, and there's a chance they might be going to a single tax rate. The Worcester Chamber of Commerce just published a news article that I gave you a copy of on how well Auburn's strategy of lowering our business tax rate reduction is working, despite Auburn having the second highest business tax rate in Worcester County after the city of Worcester. Our bond rating is excellent, and that reflects the right mixes of business and commercial use. That is why we need to continue to work towards a single tax rate in this town. We have made tremendous progress in bringing businesses back to Auburn, but we are still not there yet. We cannot go backwards at this time. We still have a lot of empty buildings for rent, and the Auburn Mall can be in jeopardy in the near future with Sears and Macy's. This is a win-win decision for the residents and the Auburn businesses. So I am asking the Board of Selectmen not only to keep the small business tax classification, but to also lower the commercial rate to 1.16. We thank you and for all your hard work and consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkeesian. Anyone else? Mr. Kapoor.
My name is Amar Kapoor, and I'm president of 2 businesses, as a matter of fact, 3 businesses in Auburn, and we are very proud of it. In the last year, since our last year, we have increased our business by exporting more rather than, business within Massachusetts and domestic have stayed flat for us, but we have increased our business by exporting more, and we are trying very hard. And the reason, I was here last year and I was here before, because I'm very confident of the actions that you folks are taking, and I'm hoping what Mark echoed, I support his thing, that we have to be competitive, and in order for us to be competitive, taxes is one of the things that you see. There's a tax reform coming, and we are viewing it very carefully because there is in the bill, they are talking about exempting, deduction for state taxes. And those are the things, so that our cost will go up, but we have to value in terms of what the neighbors over here offer and what Auburn is offering. I urge the council, you folks are very proactive, and I hope and you have demonstrated by keeping the taxes, keep on getting to the parity level that we have been urging for so long. I hope, and I'm echoing Mark's sentiments here, and he's talking in behalf of all the businesses, and I hope as a business person, I hope you take the right action and the prudent action. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. DeFalco. Dr. DeFalco.
Good evening, Dr. Fran DeFalco. I have a practice here in Auburn. I actually grew up in Auburn as well, and I've been practicing here about 7 years now. And I recently became the president of the Auburn Chamber, so I am here representing the local businesses in the Chamber of Commerce. First, I want to say thank you for the work you've done in the last decade or so in bringing the rate down and trying to close that gap. We've seen a positive impact, as Mark has expressed. We want to see that trend continue. We do ask that you continue to try to help us make the town more attractive. I believe with the convergence of the highways and the infrastructure we have, that we should be doing a lot more business, and I think the tax levy has been one of those issues, and in the trend that you've been doing the last decade, we'd like to see that continue so we can bring in more business, and I think that will ultimately bring in more jobs, bring in more revenue and residents in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to say anything? Mr. Murray.
Tim Murray from the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, and here on behalf of our partner affiliate, and Mr. Sarkeesian and Dr. DeFalco both referenced the trend, and it's one that is really noteworthy and extremely positive. And Mr. Sarkeesian passed out the article. Here is actually the cover of the Chamber Exchange newspaper, of which we printed 25,000 and mailed and distributed to members and voters throughout central Massachusetts, because it underscores a commitment that has been taking place here in Auburn because of the economic development policies that have been pursued with the support of the board, Julie Jacobson and the administration, with the strong support of the Auburn Chamber. And the the assessor's report was pretty powerful when you look at the 20-year trend. That incremental change that you have been making over the last 11 years, coupled with those policies over the last 20, are moving and growing the commercial industrial tax base. And as was pointed out, that then mitigates impacts on the residential homeowner. That's not always easy to make those incremental changes, but it's one that pays and is paying dividends here in Auburn. And we would certainly encourage the board to continue with that effort, because it sends the message. And as you heard from several of the business owners, Mr. Kapoor will include the two businesses, it sends the message of predictability, of the value that you see in businesses that are creating jobs for the Auburn residents and the residents of central Massachusetts. And it's a policy that we think is shown great wisdom, and just would encourage the board in its deliberations to consider the track record that has come about because of those policies, and respectfully continue it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll open it up to board questions or comments. Mr. Berthiaume.
Well, I'm very in favor of continuing to make movement, whether it be, small, or whether we can do a jump of 4 points like Mr. Sarkeesian had asked for. I just feel that, every year that comes up, we can certainly find reasons why, we should wait until the next year to bring this tax differential closer to a single rate. But the fact of the matter is that, looking at some of the figures that I saw with the presentation, your average residential tax, even if we drop down 2 points to 1.18, you're probably looking at less than, $1 a week per resident. And, we need to, I think ever since I've been a kid, the businesses have done a lot for this town. The businesses have kept the residential tax rate low, and we need to, they're all struggling, and we need to put our best foot forward and, show some movement. It doesn't have to be big, we're not looking to go to a single rate this year. There's other things that, the revaluation I can take into consideration, that's one thing. But again, each year, I'm sure we can come up with a reason why we should hold off and not make any movement. But I think it's irresponsible for us to do that. And I just would like to see some sort of movement, and I don't think 1.16 is outrageous, but if the board, doesn't want to go that far, I think we should at least show some movement.
Thank you, Mr. Berthium. Anyone else? Mr. La Liberty?
I've said before, in general, I support moving to a single rate. I think it is beneficial to the town in the long run, and to the residents and businesses. I'm hesitant to move a full 4 points because of the change in value for residential properties. So I would be in favor of moving 1 point, 1 or 2 points in this year.
Anyone else? Mr. Carpenter?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank both Ed and Cindy for the excellent presentation. I think in the 3 years I've been on, I think this is the best presentation yet. So I appreciate it. I think the information that you gave us is even more helpful than it was to me last year. This is my least favorite meeting of the year because it's a no-win situation for the board. If we move business, then the residents are upset. If we stay pat, the businesses aren't happy. So I would echo Mr. Berthium's comments as far as we are very grateful to the business community for all that you do for the community. Since I've been on the board, and even before that, I've noticed a steady increase in donations, and they're not small items. Our concert series alone is almost entirely underwritten by gifts from our business community, so I'm not unmindful of that. However, I am also mindful that the residents who speak to me are concerned about their residential property taxes. They don't share the optimism that we hear tonight. However, I would be willing to make a change, and I would make a motion that we go to a factor of 119 this year.
So Mr. Carpenter has made a motion for 119. Is there a second on that?
I'll second the motion.
There's a second. Is there further discussion on that? Mr. Berthium?
I don't think that's enough of a movement on it. Again, if you go back and look at page number 9, even though we've made the movement, if you look at the 2008 to 2017, the businesses are still absorbing a greater percentage of the levy. We make movement to help them there, but they're still absorbing a greater percentage of the levy than they were in 2008. A great percentage of our levy has to do with schools, education, and that type of thing that I don't think, number one, the businesses get a great advantage of. Number two, above and beyond that, as Mr. Carpenter said, the businesses are continuously giving to our schools, our youth programs, you know, anything that comes up. Our businesses are the most giving people I've ever come across. I've never seen another town that does what they do. I speak to other towns, and those towns are, oh, you know, I have to give my kid $300 to play soccer. I have to give my kid, you know, $200 to be in the band. Auburn does a lot of things for, you know, inclusive in the schools, which is the most wonderful thing in the world, that we don't have to be worried about dropping a sports program because we don't have the money. Auburn has been great about doing that. For that, we've had some pretty great sports teams. But having said that, a lot of times when those sports teams do need something extra, where do they go? They go to the businesses. And in spite of the fact that the businesses have absorbed what they've absorbed up until now, in spite of the fact that they're paying a bigger percentage of the levy than they were in 2008, you know, I think that we need to go at least 2 or 3 points, and I would ask Mr. Carpenter if he would maybe amend it and go to at least 1.18 or 1.17, if he would consider that.
Excuse me, before we have any more discussion on this, Mr. Carpenter made a motion while we were under discussion, which we should have just been under discussion, but we do have a motion on the floor. So I'll now need to entertain a motion to close the hearing, which we should have done before any motions were.
So moved.
So there's a motion to
Second.
close the hearing. The second, is there any discussion on closing the hearing?
Just if, through the chair to the audience and through the public, ask them one more time if there are any further comments after hearing some of the
Okay, we're ready
discussion's been made.
We're ready to move for a vote on the,
To close the hearing.
no, we're ready to move for a vote on the vote of the residential factor. Is there any discussion before we close the hearing? There'll be no further discussion after we close the hearing. All those in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? The hearing is now closed. So now we're back to discussion on the residential factor. We have a motion on the floor for 1.19. Mr. La Liberty has seconded it. Under discussion, Mr. Berthium has asked Mr. Carpenter to reconsider his motion to lower it even further, but we're still under discussion on the original motion. So I'll now hear from Mr. Holstrom.
Through the chair, I have no problem hearing what you've talked about. I think that we're going to a single tax rate. I think is going to be in the best interest of the town at some point. Right now, I'm not sure if that's the way we want to go. Definitely, we do not want to turn around and go back. We definitely want to head for the single tax rate, and that would be my feeling. And yes, you are right. The businesses are approached whenever somebody needs some help. The businesses are approached, and we do appreciate everything, all the sponsorships, all the support of all the businesses in town. That makes our town go through a progressive note, and we've done very, very well with that. However, I have spoken to also to residents and some of the people that are on fixed incomes. The tax rates are a little bit difficult to swallow. And one of the things I have seen in good conscience have looked at very, very closely is what is happening on the national level. Tax increases at the residential level, if we were to go that route, would in some cases significantly hurt some people on fixed incomes, and maybe not so much, but would put a kind of a dent in people's budgets, their homeowners' budgets. It seems as though they want to take a vote this week to determine the tax break, the tax law that's coming through, and right now it's kind of a bad time for us to be going through with this, but my feeling is we should stay where we are at 1.2. that 1.2 would maintain good business relationships. It would help the residents so that if the tax rate does go through and, well, the discussion is that the taxes may not be that great for the residents, the middle-class people, that some of the deductions may not be able to be taken. There's still a lot of unknowns, a lot of questions being made out there. I don't want to increase taxes on the local level, whereas the national level taxes may be also increased, hitting the residents twofold. And that's my feeling, so I would not support the drop in the tax rate at this point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Carpenter, did you have something regarding Mr. Berthium's comment?
No, not at all.
Okay, okay. So I'll now comment. So I've always, and many of you in the room have been here many years, looked at this as just much more than setting the tax rate. When we're looking at what we can do for the business community, it is much more than the tax rate. First, we want to look at the historic trends. Yes, we've all acknowledged that it's working, but in the historic trends, 2007, 2008, we maintain the same level. 2013, 14, 15, and 16, we maintain the same level, but we're still making progress. Looking at when a business owner comes to look at placing themselves in Auburn, they also look at public safety, which we've invested in. They look at the infrastructure, which we've invested in. We talked about not going to the levy limit. I know that all communities around us are taxing to the max. We, with the financial policies that we've adopted, working with the Finance Committee, which our chairman is here, thank you, Mr. Hussey, for being here, and the school committee, we've worked on policies to not go to the levy limit. If we look at the number, if we had levied to the max this year, the business increase would be over $3,000. We've invested in economic development and including economic development staff. The town manager continues to hold business roundtables. And as the CFO said, we're committed to the long-term plan. We're not going backwards, but sometimes we have to look at where we are right now and what the opportunity is. Looking at what we heard tonight, hearing what we heard from Ms. Cosgrove, even if we stay at the 120, the businesses will still see a reduction in their taxes. The residents will see an increase. So I'm in favor of maintaining the 1.20.
That being said, Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my motion.
Your motion for the 1.19?
19. Yeah.
We have a withdrawal, and the second, Mr. Liberty, you will withdraw your motion, your second?
I'll
Okay.
withdraw my second.
So the motion has been withdrawn. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we lower the rate to 1.18.
Is there a second? There is no second. Is there another motion?
I make a motion, we maintain the rate at 1.2.
Second.
Is there a discussion? Mr.
I'll just make a comment that, again, I think it's very irresponsible of us to do that and not show any respect or love to the businesses with that. They've been there for us, and we went even for 3 years. We finally showed a little bit of movement last year. We didn't, go to the max as far as the homeowners are concerned. We're looking at, average homeowner less than, I'm looking at, charts that say less than $1 a week to give a little love back to the businesses. And I think that we're being very irresponsible by staying at a level field, and I just think that we should show some sort of a movement this year.
Is there any other comment? So, Ms. Olivia, Mr. Berthium, I appreciate your comments. I don't see it as you do. I think that we've done a lot over the last several years and this year, including not going to the levy and seeing that the businesses will see a reduction in their taxes. But that's, I guess, where we'll have to agree to disagree at this point. So is there any other discussion? I'll do a roll call vote. So the motion is to stay at the 120. Mr. La Liberty?
No.
Mr. Berthium?
No.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Holstrom?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the next item we need to vote on is in whether we want to vote on the open space discount.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we do not set an open space discount.
We have a motion to not adopt the open space discount. Is there a second? Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, so voted. To whether we adopt the residential exemption.
I make a motion that we do not use or apply a residential exemption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, so voted. And also the 10% commercial small business exemption.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we keep the small commercial tax exemption as proposed at the 10%.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, so voted. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cosgrove, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich, for the input. Moving on, we have no communications. Under Board of Selectmen items, we have the Auburn Sportsman's Club indoor entertainment license at 50 Elm Street. Is there anyone here for that? Good evening. Cindy, do you need a minute to close up, or are you all set?
No, I'm all set. Everything is just kind of stays here.
Okay.
I will notify you when the paperwork's ready.
Okay, I just didn't want to move on to the next item if you needed a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So again, we have an application from the Auburn Sportsman's Club for an indoor entertainment license at 50 Elm Street. Good evening. If you could give your name for the record and tell us a little bit about your application.
My name's Leanne Strong. I'm the bar manager of the Auburn Sportsman's Club. I met with the DCG on November 1st in regards to the indoor entertainment license. I'm not sure exactly what you guys want from me. So if you have questions, I mean, we don't have bands or anything like that. We have a guy that comes in and sings, so that's about the extent of our outdoor entertainment or indoor.
Okay.
We don't have big bands and hundreds of people or anything like that. The hall only holds 99.
Okay.
So we never go over that.
Okay. So we're just addressing the indoor entertainment license tonight. Okay. Do members have any questions? None at all? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the license provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license subject to all conditions stated upon it. Failed to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void with the conditions of the DCG to be placed on the license.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, so voted. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the 2018 annual liquor license renewals. Enclosed is a list of annual liquor license renewals for 2018. They were reviewed by the treasurer-collector with no issues indicated. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Holstrom?
Yes, through the chair, is this a complete list? It is not. Do you know of how many more there are coming?
This is about half of them.
Okay. What is the deadline on?
Through the chair, these are normally, they have to all be approved by the end of December, but we try to, we're taking them in batches as we're getting them so as to, A, not overwhelm the board with an extensive list.
Okay.
And some are ready earlier than others, so rather than waiting, we're going forward with those that have already submitted for their re-apps.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Berthium?
Is it okay to ask, like, I know some of these are corporate names.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm
Which ones?
trying to figure out what each of them are. The last one, Who is that?
The Golf New England?
Yeah.
That's the golf place on Route 20 near Motorsports.
Oh, the indoor?
We have the indoor
Is it indoor?
simulators and
The
stuff,
simulators?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any others? So Greece Summit is the gas station over near the Old Rails Deli, and Mick is Chuck's Steakhouse. If there are no questions, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, we approve the license renewals, provided that all the applicable requirements of the state and town and in its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license is subject to all conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void.
Are you adding the
And
conditions?
adding the
of
conditions of DCG, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holstrom. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Moving on, we have gift acceptance in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. We have a donation from the Pappas Foundation for AED batteries. Here is the figure. I don't have the...
Do you need anything here?
No. So, Ms. Jacobson, we have the letter. Could you explain to us, we have the letter here under donations. Could you explain to us what we're voting on? Because there's generally a form with a figure attached, just so members know what.
Certainly, and I'm speaking for Darlene Coyle, who just stepped out to help a resident out in the hall, so if she comes back in and has anything
Okay.
to add, I refer.
Do you want us to hold this?
No, that's okay. So, as the board knows, the Pappases generously donated AEDs, which are the automated external defibs, and some came to public buildings, and some went to churches and other organizations where the public congregates. And over time, those batteries need to be replaced, and they can be costly to do that. Between say $200 and $400, depending on the unit. The Mrs. Pappas, Dr. Martha Pappas, volunteered to donate batteries to not just to the First Congregational Church where one of the units is, but to everybody who happened to have an original unit. So in the interim, we reached out through Darlene to find out, and through the church, to find out from Mrs. Pappas if that applied to just those that were off-site, non-municipal, or municipal as well, and she generously said no, any that were given to the town, the schools, or any of the organizations. So in the interim, the schools have replaced a couple of their batteries, and I believe we have replaced either one or two over the years, but we do need to have those replaced. So we would be working with the church. The donation would be made, basically Mrs. Pappas would be giving them to the church as well as to us, so we thought it was appropriate to have you acknowledge that these would be donated, and B, vote to accept that donation of the batteries. So we wouldn't actually be getting a monetary fee for it. We would actually just be getting the batteries themselves.
And these are for, what we would accept tonight would just be for municipal or...
Correct. The school department
use,
would
yes.
be, if the school
Municipal
department would
use.
be accepting their own.
Okay.
So they are in the process of inventorying which ones may need batteries. They had actually already started doing that right before Mrs. Pappas had contacted the church. And we had also been similarly working on that as well. And I know, I don't mean to put him on the spot, but I know the fire chief is here as well, and I know his office has been involved in looking at the AEDs and determining what needs to be done to them. So if you have anything to add, or you think we're all set.
I don't have the exact battery count. I want to say it's somewhere around 15 that would be coming to the town, but Darlene has the exact number.
Okay.
You want me to go see if I can get it?
If possible, that would be helpful.
Mr. Holstrom.
Through the chair, just so I understand, this isn't going to be just for the churches and, public buildings. It's going to be for our municipal buildings also. It's going to be for the town hall, for the fire station, for all the buildings in town that have AEDs now that were supplied originally by the Pappas Foundation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And let me clarify, and any that would be going to the schools would have to be accepted by the school department.
Okay.
So they would be handling their aspect of the donation separately, I believe, in an upcoming school committee meeting.
Thank you. With that being said, I guess,
And if I may add, also, we're waiting to get the number. We have also gone through with the fire department and the Board of Health, each of the AEDs in municipal side, to look at what ones might need to have their pads replaced. And those actually need to be replaced every couple of years. So there is an expense to maintaining them, and it's absolutely worth whatever it is we need to do to keep those here. You know, if just one person gets saved because of that, it's important. So,
Absolutely.
you know, we're grateful that Mrs. Pappas is willing to donate these through the foundation to the town. And again, the number is a little, you know, some of them, you have to test every single one of them to determine the state of the battery. And some may almost be ready for replacement, but not 100%. So that's what Darlene has been working on.
I think we could make a motion to accept up to 20. Mr. Holstrom, go ahead.
Through the chair, I would also like to acknowledge the work from Stanley McPhee, and he's the Board of Trustees of the First Congregational Church. I had talked with him a couple of times out here in the parking lot that he was very, very much in favor of going forward with this, and he's done a lot of the legwork and asked a lot of questions from what I understand on this, so I want to be sure that we acknowledge Stanley McPhee from the First Congregational Church for his efforts in putting forward this program. Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter, did you have something?
I just wanted to make a motion that we accept up to 20 AED batteries from the Pappas Foundation, and that we send a letter signed by the chair to the Pappas Foundation and to Mr. McPhee at the First Congregational Church for their efforts and their generosity.
Is there a second?
Second.
We're still in discussion. Darlene, I'm sorry, you were helping a resident, so thank you. We've had the discussion. We just want to get information from you on where we're at for numbers and stuff. As you heard, Mr. Carpenter just made the motion for up to 20. If you have a better sense in that, if you feel that motion will be adequate, that's how we'll leave it.
Sure, thank you. I do believe that the donation of the AED batteries was going to be for the AED batteries that were handled on the town building side, and including some of our community churches and places in the community where residents congregate. I think we were in the range of 13 or so. Forgive me not having the numbers right in front of me, but we have been in contact with First Congregational Church, and they were working with the Pappas donation. So I think we're in the range of 13 plus, but I think 20 would definitely cover us.
Right. And thanks so much for the work you've done on this.
Sure. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. And so we've addressed the proclamations earlier. The next item is to designate 2 board members to the SPED Stabilization Joint Policy Group. This is the group that was approved through town meeting to address a revolving.
If I may, it's a separate stabilization account that was approved by a vote of town meeting. This account would, or this group would establish guidelines in its use in terms of contribution, as well as its use in terms of expense. It can only be used for special ed type expenditures. But there were a lot of questions leading up to the submittal of the warrant article, which actually was withdrawn when it was presented in May, because it was a relatively new act that was passed by the legislature, and not many communities had adopted it. So I know there were some concerns as I'm peering out and looking at the chair of the Finance Committee. On behalf of his committee, there were some questions and concerns. A lot of those questions have been answered, but there is still some concern on how it's going to be fed, you know, through annual contribution or through a series of surpluses that may feed. These types of discussions need to take place with this working group.
Okay. And if you know, before members step up to volunteer for this committee, do you have any idea how many meetings this will involve? You know, how long this appointment will be for?
I think they're looking to get this committee started before the first of the year. I would guess maybe 3 meetings. They should probably have something to bring back for the boards to vote.
Okay. And the school committee and the finance committee have already appointed 2 members each?
Finance has not, they'll be going before them this Wednesday evening.
Okay. Mr. Holstrom?
Through the chair. Eddie, this policy, I guess policy committee, is that going to be to determine the budget itself, or is this going to be in addition to the budget sped accounts?
In essence, this will become a part of the financial policies. It will have its own separate, it will be its own separate item. In order to feed this, the policy would drive the feeding mechanism. In order to utilize it, it requires a vote of the school committee and Board of Selectmen. So we can get you the baseline terms and conditions that's specified under the Act, but you can go above and beyond that. You could have your own internal policy on its use.
Okay, just as a follow-up, again, will this affect any of the special education budget that comes from the state or that comes from the town, or is this in addition to it?
It should not affect any current funding mechanism that comes to the town, either from the federal government or the state for special ed purposes. Also Medicaid receipts and circuit breaker. It's basically a backstop for placements that may hit the town unanticipated. It provides a reserve. For instance, if you recall the budget that we're currently in, $450,000 of additional monies were required because there were some outside placements that were not known at the time the budget was initially submitted to the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Having heard the discussion, is there anyone who wants to volunteer to serve on this committee?
I'll volunteer.
So I've heard Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Holstrom volunteer. So is there a motion to designate Mr. Carpenter and Mr. Holstrom to the SPED Stabilization Joint Policy Group?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good luck
Thank
with
you.
your new positions. We have town manager items. We have a vote to authorize and accept grant funds through the St. Vincent's Healthcare Fund of $1,000 for Rides for Health by the Executive Director of the Senior Center Elder Affairs. Ms. Jacobson.
Through the chair, this is a grant that we're grateful that we've been eligible to apply for the last few years, and we generally get somewhere between $1,000 and $1,200, and it is to offset the costs of the transportation for seniors. It helps offset the town's cost to the WRTA van shuttle service.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
A motion we accept with gratitude.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Next, we have the housing plan approval update. And you have a letter in your packet, but I'll have the town manager.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to let the board know and the public know that we did receive approval from the State Department of Housing and Community Development for our housing plan and our housing production plan. That, as you know, we received a $25,000 PATH grant from the state because we're a compact community, so we were able to apply for it. It was a competitive grant. We were funded. We hired a consultant to do the study. We put together a housing subcommittee, to which we're very grateful for all the work they did. They put a lot of time and effort into this, working with the consultants, which was CMRPC and Karen Sonneberg, the subcontractor, to put together a really comprehensive housing study. As you know, the board approved it, the planning board approved it. It went off to the state per the requirements, and the state has approved it. So because we have the approval, it doesn't mean that immediately we can put a halt on any Chapter 40B projects. Just want to be clear, there's still another step, and that is you have to show progress toward your housing production plan goals. Progress would be the permitting of either of the 2 schools for their projects through the comprehensive permit, because both of those are senior affordable housing and will count toward our final total. So once those projects receive their comprehensive permit approvals, that triggers the kind of halt on the town's necessity of accepting Chapter 40B applications that are not friendly. We haven't hit that benchmark yet, but this was the very first step to get there. So I want to thank the Housing Subcommittee for their work, and we'll continue to work with Penrose Properties on their 2 projects. They're before the ZBA again this week, and that process is moving along.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Excuse me. Moving on, we have the municipal aggregation contracts. Excuse me.
Through the chair, we wanted to just update you and the residents, and this was posted back in late October, I believe it was right after your last board meeting, what the new rate was. And Ed and I and Matt Benoit work with our municipal aggregating consultant, which is Colonial Power, to solicit bids for competitive, it's called community aggregation, and everyone knows that as municipal aggregation. And as you probably recall, we had a 1-year contract that started 2 years ago, so we went through our first contract, then we renegotiated and had our second contract, and this contract is due to expire in December. And when we went out for bid, our goal was to try to find a rate that was either 6-month or 18-month, because we want to get on a different cycle. Right now, we're on the cycle of getting prices in October, which tend to be a little higher than the prices that you get in April. Of course, recognizing that the suppliers blend their rates out in the aggregate, because they're not going to put a rate out of 6 cents knowing their rate's going to jump to 16. So it is still, it may save us a little bit, but it may not save as much as we would like to see. But when we looked at the rates and the rates came in, the rate for the 18-month we felt was a little high. Our municipal consultants and all the trend analysis that we've looked at is showing that the rates a year from this winter are likely going to spike pretty high at National Grid, which means other suppliers follow, their rates will spike also. So we felt the best, most safest approach was to go with a 6-month contract at a rate of, we have a rate here of 0.114560 per kilowatt hours. And if you look to the right on your chart, National Grid's basic service rate was announced at 0.12673. So it's still below National Grid, which is a good rate. And then our strategy is to go back out to bid again in April and see if we can get a longer-term contract at a more favorable rate than we would have been able to do so right now, because they're already building in next year's expected spike, which we understand could be upwards of 14 cents, potentially even 15 cents. And the professionals who do this all the time look ahead and they see what the demand is, and a lot of it has to do with gas and the supply of gas and where that goes, and that drives the electric rate. So they're, well, it's anybody's guesstimate. They've been pretty much on target with their general range. So we did secure a contract for 6 months, again with Constellation Energy, which is the supplier. They've done very well by the town of Auburn as far as our customers. They've serviced them well. And we will go back out again in May, and again, we'll, at that point, we'll probably be looking for a 12-month or a 24-month, because we want to stay on that same time frame. So that's where we are. We are required to notify the public, do all the postings, which we did. And we actually, we did the best we could. We actually waited, we got an initial bid. We waited a couple of days because we knew the weather forecast was changing, so we actually looked ahead at the weather forecast and said, you know what, if we wait a couple days, chances are better that's going to go down than it's going to go up. Because obviously with a cold spell that we had in October, the rates did go up. So we waited it out, we got to that warm period, we went out a second time, and we did have quite a good savings on that.
Excellent.
Great.
Are there any questions or comments? If you could, I know, again, I've mentioned social media earlier tonight, but if you could just post this on the town's
I'll double
webpage
check.
again, just
Yeah.
because
I
there's
believe
been a
it's
lot
still
of, but just refresh it
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
There's
we'll
been a lot
double
of
check.
buzz about the town's
It was
rates.
posted initially and it was posted on our website, and it was posted on Auburn Community Television, so I'll double check and see. Sometimes those postings, once you do it, as you know,
Yeah,
it gets buried in all the other
And then
postings
people
that come.
start
So, yeah.
the chatter
So we can
again,
certainly
so.
look at repost if we need to.
Great, thanks. And the next item is a nice positive item, a recognition of the presentation on social media made by Amanda.
Right, and I wanted to let the board and the public know, Amanda Gage, who works both for cable television and for our IT department, she just does a great job, and she's been very active on social media. She's actually now our designated social media person. She monitors it every day, all the time. She gets in touch with the various department heads if there's a comment to be made that we need to respond to the public. So she's been really tremendous at this. And I know the fire chief is here and the police chief will tell you she's also been designated by us as our emergency social media person. So when we have an emergency coming up, let's hope we don't, but a major snowstorm or ice storm or anything like that, we notify Amanda. So whether it's the police, myself, the fire chief, the Department of Public Health director, the DPW director, whoever has something that we want to get out to the public in an emergency, we go through one contact. So there's no mixed messages. That one contact sees all the messages coming in from the different departments. If there's any issue, if there's any controversy before she posts it, she checks with each of the department heads to make sure we're all giving the same message on the same time, the same information. So the reason I put this before you tonight is that Amanda was asked to speak at UMass Boston to students in the Masters of Public Administration class. And the name of the class is Information Management and Technology for Municipal Managers. So it's primarily geared toward town administrators, department heads. It's a great program, and she actually spoke to the class on Auburn's social media use and policy. So two things. I want to thank Amanda because she's just done a tremendous job, and also wanted the board to know that we do take social media seriously. We have a good policy in place. We make sure that it's used appropriately. We haven't had any issues with it. It's been a very effective tool for us, and it's noticed by other communities that we're doing a lot with it. I know the fire chief has spoken at several events statewide and outside of the state on it. I have as well. It's something that a lot of communities were a little shy about taking on, but if you do it right, it's a really effective tool for reaching a certain demographic population.
Great.
So we want to thank Amanda.
Great, good job.
Thanks.
Anything on that? The next item we have is a request to accept a grant in the amount of $30,000 from the Pappas Foundation to fund a feasibility study for a town swimming pool. And in your packet, you have an explanation, but I'll turn to the town manager.
Thank you. The Pappas Foundation was interested in pursuing the potential for a swimming pool in town. And prior to even looking at that, we believe, Eddie and myself, discussed this and felt that we should apply for a feasibility study to determine what the costs are of an initiative like this. And there's basically 3 levels of costs that we need to look at. We need to look at the ongoing operational costs, which are staffing, insurance, liability, equipment, things that are used on an annual basis on the operating budget. Then there's your maintenance budget, and your maintenance budget is your daily and your annual maintenance. It's chemicals, it's the cleaning, it's the testing, the water quality. There's a lot that goes into the ongoing maintenance. And then there's your repair. What are the repair costs? How often are you going to have to replace parts or components to this? And then obviously the largest cost is what does it cost to build one, and where could we build one? And then the final piece, not cost related but demand related, is are the residents in town willing to support something like this? And if there is a cost to the taxpayer, are they willing to bear that cost in order to have a swimming pool? So we felt that we couldn't make a recommendation to the board on whether we should proceed on this until we had some better data that indicated what all these costs are. We've done some preliminary analysis of maybe 12 or 13 pools in the state. Some of the data is a little older because not all of them have recently renovated or constructed pools. So we'd like to go a little bit beyond the information that we were able to gather to look at whether this is something that's feasible. So we applied to the Pappas Foundation for a $30,000 grant. So there'd be no cost to the town to conduct this analysis, and then when this is done, we could bring it back to the board, and it would be a basis for the board to have a continuing discussion. This, I want to be clear, this doesn't commit the town to anything other than getting a feasibility study. We do get a lot of calls, as I'm sure you do, asking if we can have a pool. You know, we've had groups approach us and say they'd like to fundraise for a pool. We don't really know what the costs of that are. We wouldn't even know where to begin to tell them to start looking at that. So I think this will help the residents understand what the costs are and help make a decision as to whether there is a demand to do this, and it would help the board and whether this ultimately would be something that went to the voters. They would also need to have this information. So I should add that, so we submitted what you have here, the proposal for a feasibility study, to the Pappas Foundation just to see if they would entertain paying for a feasibility study, and they did approve of this pending the acceptance of the Board of Selectmen.
Are there any questions or comments?
We need a motion?
We need a motion.
I do have a comment before we make a motion, but my concern, and I stated at last meeting, was, and still is, taxes, especially on the residential side. We also, as part of the tax, should look at the fees that we charge. But I will support going forward with this, but I think if, once we have the feasibility study, I would ask the board to consider putting this on an annual town meeting, a question, and getting the voters to decide whether we have a pool or we don't. So that was the only thing I wanted to say.
Thank you. Did you have a motion, Mr.
I'll make a
Berthium?
motion to approve the grant of $30,000 from the Pappas Foundation to fund a feasibility study for a town swimming pool.
Is there a second? Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. The next item we have is the fiscal year 2019 Budget Kickoff Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Kasnovich.
All I can say is, although for the first year, I think this is getting as much hype as the release of the iPhone 10. So I'm going to keep you in suspense. We are kicking the budget off this Wednesday at 7 o'clock before the Finance Committee in this room. And we will provide a copy to the board as well as post it online once a presentation is made. I know at a previous meeting we asked you for any priorities in advance of this release, although we can still incorporate some of those priorities in a final budget, but it's nice to know earlier than later in the game. So I do respect your feedback. So if there are any priorities that the board wishes to address, certainly it would help us out on the administration side to bake that into the early projections. So,
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Mr. Holstrom.
Through the chair, I guess in the past we've made a lot of acceptances for the school department for capital improvement budgets, and their capital improvement budget has been pretty significant. We've got new fields coming for the high school. We've got the 2 new buildings. And I know in the operating budget they have a lot of required special education. But the special education account keeps coming to us every year, but then the school department continues to come back and says, we need more, and I don't know why we're not getting enough to them for special education responsibilities first of the year when they have to keep coming back for it. I know there was some, wiggle room with people come in, or some of the kids come in, some of the kids are transferring from one place to another. However, I think that, if we can kind of reel in the special education funding, find out where it is, how much they actually do use from year to year, and take a good look at it. I think we might be able to adjust some of our budget to that so that the town could take a look at some of our projects and see where we can go with it and help ourselves out on this side also. So I know that the administration has worked very, very closely with the schools, and I think that Yeah, we've done very, very well, but I think now it's time to kind of tighten our belt a little bit. We've held the line on the tax classification to try to help out the residents. The budget continues to go up on the school side. We, on our side, have tried to maintain our own and hold the municipal side budget. It's time that I think we come a little bit closer together and work a little bit closer and a little harder and see if we can't get some of those budget lines kind of reeled in a little bit so we understand exactly what they are. And I do understand that we have to vote the bottom line and they have responsibility over their whole budget, but I think as to the town to be responsible, I think it's instead of making any transfers of what they have within their budget, I think we should be able to see exactly what their special education budget is, not move any of the money around and use it all for special education if they need it.
And if I may just follow up on that, I do appreciate the feedback. I think some of those discussions would be fruitful when the working group meets with regards to the establishment of the reserve account. Certainly it does provide some relief when those situations do arise. Although I can tell you to a certain extent the school administration's they're handcuffed to a certain extent because the numbers are not known by them until February or March, well after the budget has been.
And I do understand that.
So I think this account hopefully will alleviate some of those issues in the long term. Mm-hmm. How we get there in the short term is really up for discussion by the working group. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Anything else on that? Thank you, Mr. Kesnovich. We have no tabled items. We have no member items unless any members have anything tonight. Seeing none, I guess we handled our resident concern. Thank you so much, whoever handled that, Darlene. Thank you. And we have the minutes of September 25th, 2017 as corrected, and the minutes of October 23rd, 2017. Do members have any, are there any omissions or corrections? Seeing none, the board will accept them as written. Seeing no further business before us?
Second.
There's a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
We are
and good
adjourned.
night.
Thank you.